Welcome to the SeizeYourBusiness.com podcast. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law. I am here with Irene Schreiner from Solid Foundations Therapy. And our topic today is going to be 4 bad habits that can cause tension in the workplace. So thanks for being here today.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell me about yourself, Irene. Tell me about what you do.
So I'm a marriage and family therapist. So I own a private practice downtown Downers Grove, and we specialize in all things relationships. So we work with couples, we work with individuals, but we essentially focus on teaching people how to stop being angry, stop being hurt, and be really happy and satisfied in their relationships.
Okay. How long have you been doing that for?
The practice has been open for a little bit over 3 years, but I've been doing private practice and couples therapy for about 8.
Okay.
So it's a lot of fun.
And I should have said Dr. Irene Schreiner, right?
Nope.
No?
No doctor, just a master's.
Okay.
So just Irene.
Okay, all right. So what are some of the things you've seen in the workplace that you can correct? You wanted to talk about some bad habits.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the stuff we see in the workforce is actually the same things we see in everybody's everyday life. And so there's a couple of habits that people tend to do in every area of their life. And when they do them at work, they will be unhappy, they'll be unsatisfied, they'll look less positive. And so for both employees, it's not a great environment. And for the employers, it's probably frustrating because you're not getting the most out of your employee.
Sure.
And so...
and personnel issues, when there's drama in the workplace, that can just destroy productivity. And it's my least favorite thing to deal with as an employer.
Exactly.
It's, when I can have all of my employees pulling on the same side of the rope, and I'm not causing any problems, that's a good work week for me.
That's a good goal to have.
So what are some things that employees and employers can keep an eye out for?
So what people tend to do in my experience is they often will blame others for them being unhappy. And so these are actually 4 things that people do themselves that they can immediately start to correct.
Okay.
So one of them is we ascribe negative intent to other people's actions. So somebody doesn't call you back and they don't like you. They're being rude. They're intentionally trying to make your day worse. Or they, don't respond to an email when you need it to be done. They put a negative spin on the person's motivation. And so a simple counter is literally just assuming the best in people, or even just neutral intent. So it doesn't have to be like this super, super positive reason for why somebody did or didn't do something, but just something that makes you feel more neutral about it. So if the person didn't call me back, instead of assuming that they are a jerk and don't care about your time, you can assume that they got busy and that you're on their to-do list and they'll get back to you when they get a chance.
I've had employees come to me and say, "Oh, this person did this thing that's kind of ambiguous, whether it's a nasty, malicious thing or not, but they'll say, oh, he or she is trying to sabotage me, or he's got it out for me." And, usually when I talk to the person on the other side of that and get the other side of the story, it wasn't even on their radar.
Exactly.
And that's the quickest problem to resolve, is just to say, get them together and, say, oh, I'm not trying to sabotage you. Mm-hmm. I was just having a busy day, and then everything's cool after that.
And so in this manner, they can actually do this in their heads before they even get to talking to you.
That would be nice.
Save themselves the trouble, save you the trouble, and just assume that nobody's trying to sabotage them.
And I often tell them, just have a conversation with that person. Mm-hmm. It's surprising how often I've had employees that will come to me with these elaborate dramas, and they haven't spoken to the person that is on the other side of that drama. Mm-hmm. And if they would just get in the room together, 2 people talking to each other, usually can resolve most issues, and usually there's not a lot of malicious intent involved.
Exactly. The next one actually plays off of this ascribing intent, is taking things personally. And so pretty much what that means is that anything that anybody else does, you attribute that in some way to being about you. Mm-hmm. So the example I use would be, I send out a email to my employee, and it's something that I think needs to get back really urgently, and she doesn't get back to me for 3 days, right? Well, taking it personally would be me thinking, oh my gosh, you know what? She's unhappy with her job. She doesn't want to work for me. There's some extreme reason for why she's not getting back to me.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's probably the fact that, she saw the email, maybe intended to get back to me, and then it got lost in the inbox or something like that.
I've been guilty of that before, where I'll text an attorney or call an attorney that I need to have an issue resolved over an emergency over the evening, and they don't get back to me that mm-hmm. night. and I think, oh, you know what, they're just blowing off work. They're like, oh, my crappy boss is calling, I don't care.
Exactly.
It's almost always, their phone was off and they were in a movie or something.
Right,
so,
something innocent that has absolutely nothing to do with you. And so what I tell people is actually to train yourself every time you find yourself taking something personally, to then counter that and go, okay, what are 2 other reasons that this might be happening that has nothing to do with me, but would give me the same result?
Sure.
And a lot of times you'll come up with those events that are, again, most likely true. Right? They probably were just busy, they didn't see the call, something like that. Or the other personal piece that I think people take is relationships in the workforce, right? So person A and person B went out for lunch and they didn't invite me. Well, they must not like me. They must not, think of me. When most likely they maybe didn't see you. It was plans that they made a couple days ago, and so they're just following through with that. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how often that this imagined bad blood can turn into actual bad blood. When there's no actual bad blood and you start thinking that someone's getting a vendetta against you, you start acting differently around that person.
Right.
And then after a while, you've got an actual issue between the 2 of you that spun out of nothing,
Exactly, because now if I'm upset or hurt, I might now be you, or I might be rude to you, and then you're walking away going, well, why was she being mean, and what was going on with that?
Yeah.
And so now you start developing the story about me.
And it's very rare. I mean, I've had a lot of employees over the past 5 years, and a lot of issues like this, and it's very rare that there's actually someone. In fact, it's never happened where there's just someone who just doesn't like that person's face and is, trying to cause them problems. It's usually just innocent misunderstandings that get spun into something bigger.
Right. So the next point is just having poor boundaries in the workforce. We see people every day. Our employees and our coworkers are probably people that we see more than our best friends. And so we start to think of them as friends, and we will start to overshare, right? So we start to talk about our weekends and then our families and then the bad day that we had or the fight that we had. And people will have what I call a vulnerability hangover, which is I overshared. Now I feel bad that I've overshared. Now I feel awkward being around you, and so I might avoid you. And so just keeping in mind that your coworkers really are your coworkers. And of course, friendships can blossom from that, but slowly build up to that, right? Start with just, how was your weekend? Oh, it was good. Or the holidays. Stick with kind of positive, superficial, generic information. And as you get to know somebody, if, you give them a little bit and it's well received and they're kind of reciprocating back, you can build to develop that friendship. But I always tell people to kind of err on the side of caution when it comes to sharing with somebody that you are working with, because you can feel a much closer bond than you really have.
Yeah, well, and that's a problem that I have had in the past too. It's funny, each of these I've been guilty of. When I first started my firm, there were 5 of us all around the same age, working out of the top floor of my house, and we were just kind of 5 scrappy kids trying to make something happen. And we'd do socially things together on the weekends sometimes, and once 5 o'clock rolled around, we'd pull out the pina coladas, and it was fun. But those people became my friends. And then when I had to make a tough decision, not firing somebody, but just I want the firm to go in this direction, one of these people that think they're don't think of me as a boss, but think of me as their friend, disagrees with what I'm doing. They take it much more personally than my boss made an executive decision to do this. It's it's I'm being a jerk because I'm not taking their input as a friend. Yeah. And I learned that I had to I want to be nice. I want my employees to like me and feel like they can come to me with things. But I now do make a distinction between my buddies and the people I work with, because that can cause a lot more drama than just having a little separation.
Right. And I think it's actually even more risky for a boss-employee relationship when you cross the boundaries just in that friendship aspect, because you kind of either lose respect or they just don't listen to you quite the way that they're supposed to. And so then you don't have the power that you need to have.
Yeah, and when you have to get into discipline, it's almost impossible. I mean, you have to think, well, my business is more important than a friendship. It's what puts food on the table for my children. So I if I have to lose the friendship over this, that's that. But it's better not to be in that position. I've had some friends that were employees that I've had to go down a disciplinary track with, and it, changes the friendship, and it gets awkward, and it's not pleasant. And the disciplinary track, you can't follow it in the same way that you would. It's not, they take it more personally too. It's not just, okay, I messed up, I got, a written warning on this, I won't do it again, and I'm still going to be a good employee. It's, I hate this person that I'm working for, because it's kind of like when you're in a relationship, you love someone very deeply, and then when it goes bad, you don't have
like them very much.
an antipathy towards them that you would never have if you weren't, close in the first place.
Exactly. So that's, I think, a big one to watch out for, especially if you're the boss, but then you have people in charge of other people, to make sure that middle management is keeping a boundary. I had, when I was in college, I actually managed some stores, and I had an assistant manager and a third key. And that they became really good friends. And I was always really kind of like, hey, be careful, watch out. And turns out the assistant was stealing, and I caught him stealing. And by default, this third key got lumped in, where I said, okay, now I'm watching you harsher. I need to pay attention to you. And it really clicked for him to go, okay, now I'm under the mic for something I didn't do. But because you guys hung out so much, it's hard for me to separate that.
Yeah.
And then judge both of them and keep an eye on the other person now.
How do you, as an employer, how do you kind of manage these interpersonal relationships and team chemistry and stuff like that? You can't like dictate from on high about this sort of thing. And it's probably my biggest weakness as an employer, is making sure that, everybody is kind of happy in their role and there's no stuff bubbling under the surface. How do you build the team that is going to be professional and work together well, but either not get too close or not get to the point where it's interpersonal hostility?
To me, the biggest thing would be to model. So model the way you want everybody to treat each other. So you keep the positive boundaries. You voice things when somebody does something that can be taken the wrong way or the right way. You voice, oh, this is my belief. This is what I'm thinking. And so it sets up proper expectations for people. When they see you acting a certain way, then they won't start to develop weird expectations, right? So if you're not off grabbing lunch with a different person every day, they're going to recognize, okay, so this isn't just a friendly environment. Or when you're talking about, when somebody says to you, oh, how was your weekend? And your response is, oh, it was good. We had a great time with the family. And that's all the information you give. They'll start to see where your boundaries are, and they'll start to mimic that. The flip side is when you have to make a correction, really focus on what I call the soft startup. In sales, there's actually research that talks about how in the way you start your kind of first minute of your sales meeting will often dictate the rest of the meeting. So you've got like 30 seconds, right?
Okay.
In conversations, the same thing. So if you start a conversation with what they call the soft startup, which is a gentler form of communication, it will set a more positive tone for the rest of the conversation, versus if you start out kind of a hostile, aggressive way, that's going to set the tone as well. So soft startups include I statements. So I feel this way, or here's what I'm observing, and talking about what you're seeing happening versus adding a judgment to it.
Sure. Or
framing positivity within that. So, here's the things you do really well. I really appreciate the fact that you are on task and that you take care of some things and that this is done really well. I'd love to see more of that. So really kind of highlighting what they're doing well. Or the sandwich technique, where, they talk about here's the 3 things you do really well. Here's the one I'd love for you to work on, but here's all this other stuff that you're doing really well. And so it gentles the conversation up. The other part of it is making sure that you really focus on the complaint versus what we call a criticism. So a criticism is essentially an attack on who somebody is, versus a complaint is an attack on what they do. So if you come up to an employee and say to them, you're very talkative and that's distracting, that would come off more as a criticism, versus being able to say, hey, that one time at the meeting, it sounds like you were in a great mood. I got a little bit off track. We were talking a lot. Let's make sure we stay more on track. That just tweaks like that one specific action. And so that feels less like a personal attack.
Yeah, and the end result of those 2 different scenarios, it's amazing how different they can be, because if you get personal with the person and they feel like they're being attacked, there's nothing that you can say in that conversation that's going to change their behavior.
Right.
And they're going to walk away angry at you, and you're going to have a worse relationship with your employee. If you can make it so that you're working together to achieve a goal, and here's how we can do better as a team, they can actually feel, you can have a stronger bond after that conversation if you approach it the right way.
Exactly.
It's really hard to approach it the right way.
Just if you don't let your emotions get in the way, because we're all human, and there's times where, an employee's going to do something that will aggravate you or frustrate you. So if you take a couple minutes and calm down, think through what you want to say, and frame it with that soft startup, it's going to put you in a much better place to have a positive correction.
Well, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us today. If someone wants to talk to you, or if they need any sort of therapy, how can they reach you?
Well, they can give us a call directly at 847-644-9043. I'm the one that answers the phone, and I try to get back to people within a couple of hours, by the end of the day at the latest. They can also go to our website, which is solidfoundationstherapy.com, and they'll have the email address there. There's a appointment request form that goes, again, directly to me, and I get back to people pretty quickly to set that appointment up.
Well, thanks for your time. I could talk about this for an hour. We're keeping it short today, not because it's boring, but because we had a million technical difficulties to start up, and you're busy and you've got other stuff to get to. But I'd love to have you back sometime, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.